Well, welcome back to another episode of Fearless. And here on Fearless, you have heard me talk about Alliance Defending Freedom many times. We've even had Kristen Wagner on here. And Alliance Defending Freedom is the world's largest legal organization committed to protecting religious freedom, the sanctity of life, marriage, our parental rights. And they are the best in the world. They're the best at what they do. And a key component at ADF's mission is to keep the door open for the gospel. And the ADF team makes that happen in the courts of public opinion, legislative, the executive branch. And the mission at ADF and Samaritan's Purse and the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, they fit hand in glove because at Alliance Defending Freedom, they are faithful to fight to keep the doors open to share the gospel. And I pray that we are always longing at these organizations to remain faithful to always walk through those doors, that these ministries were a family. And like I said, ADF is the best in the world. Their wins are our wins. And as Christians and here in America and around the world, you don't even know it, but they are fighting for you and your rights every single day for your home, for your personal businesses, and for your faith. Their wins are for all Christians. So today on Fearless, I have Erin Hawley, who I am so excited to have. I've met Erin a few times in passing. She is a senior counsel and vice president of Center for Life and Regulatory Practice at Alliance Defending Freedom. Some neat things is she served on Mississippi's legal team in the Dobbs case, which overturned Roe versus Wade. She also teaches at Regent Law School, which amazes me that she has time for all of this. And then on top of that, she also happens to be the wife of Senator Josh Hawley and a mom to 3 children. Erin, I don't know how you do it all. I have looked up to you for many years. Thank you for even taking the time to join us here on Fearless today.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here with you and to get to talk about life and keeping the door open for the gospel. And it's always messy as a working mom, for sure.
Yes, you wear a lot of hats. But today on Fearless, I want people to know what you are doing at ADF because I want them to be aware, especially as we'll get into it, kind of this post-Roe America, what that looks like. What are the new challenges? But first, let's start personal because like I said, you amaze me. You do wear a lot of hats. I know that's not easy. I'm not making light of that. And to happen to be the wife of a U.S. senator, that seems like a full-time job in its own, right? So I am curious when I look at you and Senator Hawley, how did you two meet?
So we actually met in law school, but we're different years. And so we didn't know one another very well at all. And then we ended up getting to know one another. We were both clerking for Chief Justice Roberts on the United States Supreme Court, and shared an office and got to know one another. And that was it.
Y'all even shared an office together?
We did. Yes. They were renovating. Sometimes you get your own office on the court, depending, but they were renovating. So we were all crammed in an office and so got to know one another really well.
That's pretty neat because God obviously had a very unique plan for the two of you because both of you fight very hard for this nation. Recently, I was in Florida at an Alliance Defending Freedom event, and I heard you talk about when the opportunity came for your husband to run for Senate, you didn't really want him to, which, man, as a wife and as a Christian, as a mom, I can understand that. But something changed your mind. What was that?
Sure. So Josh had just been elected to be the Attorney General of the state of Missouri. And he had been, an upstart. His family's not in politics. So it was a huge undertaking. I remember trying to go to the bank and set up a campaign finance account. Like, how do you? So we were really sort of starting from the ground up and had a brutal primary, a statewide campaign. Missouri's a really big state. So we had been all over the state as Josh campaigned. We had a 2 and a 4-year-old, or actually 1 and 3 when I started, and turned 2 and 4-year-old boys. And I don't know if you've ever tried to sit at a long dinner with a 2 and a 4-year-old boy, but there were lots of long dinners where people gave lots of speeches, and 2 and 4-year-old boys don't do so well in that setting. So it had been an amazing year. God had been with Josh, and he was able to succeed and be elected Missouri's Attorney General. But it had also been a lot for our family. And almost as soon as he was elected, people started urging him to run to challenge then Senator Claire McCaskill for the Senate seat. And that would be, he'd basically have to start running right again. And I was not, not on
Don't want to
board.
do that
Like,
again.
he was doing such great work as Attorney General. He was suing the opioid industry. He was protecting women and children from human trafficking. And I, was just really hesitant to sort of jump back into the fray immediately. And Josh, to his credit, like I'm so thankful he didn't just jump at it. He didn't just say, this is the next opportunity. It's the next rung on the ladder. But he was thinking about it, and we were praying about it. And as we did that, the Lord really changed my heart, because he just sort of, the kiddos that I was trying to protect by not jumping into the fray were the ones he used to sort of change my mind. And he said, when you look at your kids in 10 or 20 years, you want to be able to tell them that you did what you could. We didn't know if Josh would win. We didn't know what the race would look like. But just to be able to step out in faith and say, we trust you, God. And me in particular, I trusted God to take care of my children, even in the midst of sort of campaign craziness. So he just really, I think, changed our minds and put it on Josh's heart to serve whatever that looks like.
Yeah, and that be getting hard. That can be fearful, because you want to protect your children, and the ugliness of what a campaign can be, and the ugliness of Washington, D.C., and how hard that is on a family. But when God's called you, you really lived in obedience. And here in Fearless, I encourage people, in whatever corner of the world you're in, wherever God has called you, there are going to be moments where it is fearful to take that step, but he's calling us to be obedient. And I know that was no easy decision on the two of you. And both of you in your own right have been fighting for America and what we stand on in many different ways. But you served on the legal team helping Mississippi defend pro-life law and ultimately overturning Roe versus Wade and the Dobbs versus Jackson women's health case in the U.S. Supreme Court. Tell us of what that opportunity meant to you as a mom, first and foremost, because I've heard you've took your daughter back and forth as you were traveling to work on that, and share some memories of what it was like working on that case.
Sure. So I had actually just joined Alliance Defending Freedom. I had been working part-time for a big law firm, and we had Abigail. And so I just had so many hours to devote to work, and wanted it to be something that I really cared about, that I could really invest in, and that would matter for my children and others around the world. And so I joined Alliance Defending Freedom. And I think within a month or two, Kristen Wagner called, we're heading down to Mississippi to see how we can help them with the Dobbs case that ultimately overturned Roe. And do you want to come? Can you come? And I was like, no, I've got a baby. Like, so she said, just bring her. That's one of the things I love about ADF is they're able, if your child's under 2, you can take your kid with you and bring a babysitter. And so that's what I did. So I flew down to Mississippi with Abigail and was bringing a sitter. And a funny story, my sitter, Katie, ended up being late because she also coaches. And so we were about ready to start meeting and talking internally as a team about, the strategy. And the court had changed a lot since it had last looked at an abortion issue. So there were a lot of unknowns. How would Justice Barrett approach the issue? She's personally very pro-life, but hadn't had the legal issue in front of her. Justice Kavanaugh was on the DC circuit, so he hadn't had the opportunity to look at many abortion issues. Do you ask the court to overrule Roe, or do you go more narrow? And so all of these decisions, and I was about to go into this meeting, and Abby really needed a nap. And you know what a baby is like when they really need a nap. They are not happy. So it's literally running up and down the halls of our hotel. I'm trying to get her to sleep in the stroller. She fell asleep, thankfully. And so I was able just to tuck her in the corner of the meeting room, had one of those light blankets over her stroller. And we were, discussing the nuts and bolts of the case law and those sorts of things. And Abby wakes up screaming absolutely bloody murder. And she's adorable. She's also very loud. We have 3 kiddos, and she's our only screamer. So she makes her voice heard. And at the time I was really kind of mortified. Like, I was relatively new to ADF. I was supposed to be this legal expert on the Supreme Court, and had this screaming child. But at the same time, God just really impressed on my heart, like, this is what it's all about.
Yeah.
Like, Abigail's beautiful and she's wonderful, but she's not any more deserving of life or any more uniquely created, any more valuable than any other child. And And so I loved, never imagined that I'd get to work on a case that overturned Roe, and to do it as a mom is
Mm,
just something I will always treasure.
Well, on a side note, I have a third child that came later on. And yes, she's our only screamer of the three. So I can relate to you in that. But how beautiful is, we have a world that tells us as women to follow our dreams, to be successful, that you can't be a mom and do both. And I look at you, it's so successful. But to be able, it is hard. There are challenges of being a mom. But how rewarding to be able to take your daughter on such a monumental case that God allowed you to do that. But overturning Roe versus Wade was a monumental shift. But of course, the fight for life, it continues as states have taken different approaches to the abortion laws. While some have enacted protections, others have expanded access. So the new battle that we're looking at is just really fighting chemical abortion. And I want to talk to you about that as we're coming up. But when we look at Colorado's given you at Alliance Defending Freedom a lot of fights. Of course, it's a beautiful state. It's also the state where Christians are punished for believing and living out their faith. We have Jack Phillips and the Masterpiece, which so many people know that monumental case. There's others like Creative 303, the Bella Health and Wellness that people might not know as well. But Colorado's governance has this like nasty habit of calling good evil and evil good. And they haven't seemed to learn their lesson. Every time they go to fight with ADF, Colorado hasn't seemed to learn their lesson. But I heard when you were down in Florida, you're sharing a story that this amazed me of a nurse practitioner or a midwife, I believe she was, longing to save lives in Colorado. And now she is fighting for her license. Can you share this story?
Absolutely. Well, as you said, Colorado has sort of doubled down on calling good evil. And what they have done is they have banned something called abortion pill reversal. Abortion pill reversal is super simple. It's just the administration of progesterone after a woman has taken the first abortion drug. So with chemical abortion, there's a two-drug regimen. You take mifepristone first, and then you follow it with a drug called misoprostol. Well, if you take mifepristone, a lot of women, as we know, feel coerced to get an abortion. They feel unsure about that decision. And some of them change their mind. And if they change their mind before the second drug, it's sometimes possible to counteract the effects of mifepristone by using progesterone, sort of flooding the woman's system with progesterone that competes for the receptors, the progesterone receptors in the uterus, with the bad drug, and can save the child's life. It's been successful 50 to 60% of the time. But what Colorado says is you can't do that. You can't tell women about that in Colorado, and you can't perform that service and give women progesterone in Colorado. And a brave nurse practitioner, her name is Chelsea Minnick, and she firmly believes that every life is created from God and that she has a religious duty that if a woman wants a second chance at saving her child's life, that she should be able to do that. So she administered progesterone to a lovely young woman named McKenna. As McKenna tells her story, and I think you got to see a little bit of this at the event we were at, but as McKenna tells her story, she knew immediately when she took mifepristone that she'd made the wrong decision. She regretted it terribly. She went along to see if there was anything she could do, and she was eventually connected with Chelsea. She's given birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl, and says she absolutely cannot imagine her life without her child. And she's standing beside Chelsea now, the nurse practitioner, to challenge Colorado's law and say, look, women deserve the opportunity to try to save their baby's life, and these children deserve that second chance.
Yeah, it was beautiful to hear that young mom talk about her love for this nurse practitioner. It was her only hope in that moment to save this baby. And Erin, what is their argument? Why can this nurse practitioner not share about this drug and administer it?
So this really is a case that shows how political many of the medical organizations have become. There's a medical organization known as ACOG. It's the American College of Obstetricians. And what they say is that this is unproven. And that it shouldn't be allowed. But the reality is that there are no negative effects. There's nothing harmful. It's just progesterone. Progesterone has been used for decades, for about 50 years, to help women maintain pregnancies. And it does the same thing even after women have taken mifepristone. So ACOG and others, and you may remember, your listeners may remember that ACOG is the same organization that changed the definition of a fetal heartbeat. You know, when you go to the doctor and you hear that ultrasound and your doctor says, "Oh, look, would you like to hear your baby's heartbeat?" Well, now ACOG calls that an electrical current. They're the same organization that opposes any sort of pro-life initiative. They broadly support. They filed briefs in the case in Dobbs against overturning Roe. They filed in support of chemical abortion. So just really a organization that has taken a political tack to the issue of abortion. And so Colorado looked at this and said, ACOG says we shouldn't do this. So we're not going to allow women a second chance, even though there's nothing to show that administering progesterone is dangerous to women.
I guess for me, especially who's not in the legal world, I'm a little confused because when you look at what FDA and the restrictions of just kind of the common sense safety guards, they kind of taken away from chemical abortion. And this has kind of been in the forefront of your heart. You fought a case on this before the Supreme Court. So how does that balance? You can't talk about this one drug, but then you can, and tell us about the harms of chemical abortion and how people can order these now.
That's such a good point, Cissie. If we want to talk about women's safety and really caring about women's health, then we should be very concerned about the chemical abortion drug regimen. As you mentioned, under the Biden administration, they basically gutted all of the safeguards that had been necessary for the FDA to ever approve the drug. When it was approved, the chemical abortion required 3 doctor's visits. The Biden administration took away all of those. This is really, really concerning for a drug that sends about 1 in every 25 women to the emergency room. So that is a tremendous amount of women going to the emergency room every year because of chemical abortion. And if you understand what's happening, the misoprostol basically the mifepristone, the first drug, starves the baby. And then the second drug induces labor, the misoprostol. So you're basically inducing a miscarriage. The drug is only approved up through 10 weeks, but we know that Planned Parenthood and others prescribe it through 12 or 13 weeks. And as you mentioned, the really horrifying thing that the Biden administration used COVID as an excuse to do was to get rid of that last in-person doctor's visit. That in-person visit is the only opportunity for a doctor to determine whether a woman has an ectopic pregnancy. This is really important because if a woman has an ectopic pregnancy, that can be a life-threatening condition. But she takes the abortion drugs and thinks she's having a normal abortion when she's actually has a ruptured ectopic pregnancy. Women have died from this. I think 2 of them have died just in the last few years. In addition, it's the only opportunity for a doctor to accurately assess a baby's age. As we know, women don't always know the precise age of their child. And if a woman takes it later in pregnancy, that vastly increases the risks to that woman. So now, as you mentioned, they are being mailed. So you can actually go online and in 3 or 4 minutes, answer a few questions and have the abortion drug shipped to your home or dorm room to take all alone. You're going to hemorrhage, you're going to miscarry your child, and you're going to do that alone without ever having seen a doctor. And regardless of one's stance on abortion, that should be something that's really concerning that we're subjecting our young women to here in the United States.
Yeah, what a double standard. And I think too of when you hear stories of abortion and the trauma that women face years later, even when they drive by that abortion clinic, well, now it's in their home, it's in their bathroom and they pass that every single day. What was the percentage you said again that end up in the hospital?
1 out of every 25, approximately.
Wow.
So and there's about over 600,000 women use the chemical abortion drug regimen every day. So the emergency rooms are flooded with women who have suffered from abortion drugs.
Now, and back to the stories that you're sharing with ectopic pregnancies. Now, the left has used that and has spun it to kind of really promote abortion. Can you tell us their spin on it?
That is such a good point. That the left is it's just been disingenuous in this. There is no state, not a single one, that bans treatment for an ectopic pregnancy. And the simple reason is that's not an abortion. If you have an ectopic pregnancy, it's a tragedy. It's life threatening, and that child is developing in the fallopian tube. So the child is not viable. Administering treatment at that instance is not barred by any state. And what the left has tried to do is scare women and say, if you have an ectopic pregnancy, then you're not going to be able to get treatment. That's simply false. In fact, one of the favorite crazy things about this sort of shift in opinion is before Dobbs was released, Planned Parenthood's own website said clearly that treatment for an ectopic pregnancy is not an abortion. Well, fast forward to where it's politically expedient for them to call it an abortion and say you can't get treatment. And that's precisely what they do.
Unfortunately, the case that you argued didn't go the way as planned. Explain. I don't understand how that evolved. And because who holds the FDA accountable, and do we not have a right to question the FDA now?
So I would say absolutely. We should have a right to question the FDA, especially when they remove that last safeguard and harm countless women. So what the Supreme Court did in our case was really respond to the government's change in position. To sort of back all the way up, we represented a number of pro-life doctors who work in the emergency room. And these doctors had a conscience violation by treating a woman who had suffered a chemical abortion. It was possible that they would have to take the life of that child. They objected to this. They don't object to treating women. And in fact, as the record shows, they treat every woman that comes before them. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't harm them to be complicit in this abortion procedure. The Justice Department had argued throughout the litigation and in other courts that when you have an emergency situation, doctors don't get to take advantage of federal conscience protections that exist in the law to prevent them from facilitating things like abortions or gender transitions. And so they said, sorry, you just have to lump it. It doesn't matter if your conscience is violated. But then when the case gets up to the United States Supreme Court, the United States, under the Biden administration, changed its position and said, of course, doctors can be protected by these conscience protections. And that means you don't get to raise these claims because you have conscience protections. So on the one hand, it was a really robust win for pro-life doctors because the Supreme Court laid out the most clear and most expansive encapsulation of these conscience rights. It says that if you are in the hospital system, you are entitled to these conscience protections. So that's good news for pro-life doctors. But as Justice Alito pressed at oral argument, does this mean no one can challenge the FDA? And the Justice Department basically said that's correct. Under the Biden administration's view of this, they thought no one could challenge the FDA's removal of these safeguards for women. We think that's incorrect. The lawsuit is still continuing with some states. And it's important to realize these states have a couple of different injuries. One of them is to their sovereign ability to protect their citizens. States have outlawed mifepristone as a dangerous drug, and yet it's being shipped in because of FDA's rule. And many of these women who are harmed go to hospitals that the states fund with Medicaid. So there's a lot of harm that we hope the Supreme Court will ultimately have a chance to look at.
Yeah. When I heard some of these stories at y'all's event a few weeks ago, especially the one with the nurse practitioners we were talking about earlier, and I went home to share some of these stories with my husband and our family. And it's like, how much does the enemy have to hate life? These aren't just abortions that are happening in a back alley with a woman that has no options anymore as a teenager, in the 1950s and 60s. These are women who are promoting and want to bring people to their side. It's like they want you to join in them. And I go back to like Genesis 3 and just the curse on life and how much the enemy, Satan, hates life, that he wants to take it, that here's a poor mom, a young girl who thought abortion was our only chance. And we live in a time now we can reverse that. And a lady stepped in to help her in her darkest time of need and now being punished for it. It's just like, wow, the enemy. I mean, you see it every single day. That's a hard one, that the enemy hates life that much. can't save a mom's baby?
I think that's such a good point because here, a number of states, not only Colorado, but also New Jersey and California and New York, have filed suit or issued subpoenas or just outright forbid information about abortion pill reversal. And I think the reason for all of that sort of concerted effort to just shut down and discredit trying to save a baby's life is because it disrupts their narrative. In the left's view, an abortion is always a good thing. And women don't change their mind and they're happy with it. And we know the reality is so much different. A survey from Human Coalition said that the vast majority of women who had abortions that they surveyed said that they would have chosen life if their circumstances were different, if they'd had either more family support or more economic support. And those are the things the left and certainly the right, but that we should be focusing on. We should change those circumstances for women in order to help them flourish and to facilitate life, both the woman's and the child's, rather than telling them that abortion is the only option and they'll be happy with it. That's just not the reality. And we are seeing that women regret this, that they change their mind, and the left doesn't want anyone to know that.
Yeah. Well, looking at this world in a post-Roe America and how Americans have lied to women over the years about empowerment. When you're a mom and you're looking at your little girl, what is your hope for the next generation when it comes to the message of life and empowering women?
Oh, there's so many things I want her to know, and to know so deeply in the core of her being. And I think the thing for her and for my boys as well is just to know that they are deeply loved. I love the story of Jesus's baptism, because he hadn't done anything at that point. He had lived quietly as a carpenter. He shown tremendous wisdom and insight in speaking with the biblical leaders of the time, the priests, but he hadn't done anything in his ministry. And yet when he's baptized, God sends the dove and the voice from heaven says, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased." And just that identity that God loves Abigail, God loves Elijah and Blaze just because he made them, just because they're his children. And that is true of every child. I think this speaks to the gender issue as well. Instead of telling children they need to change, we need to tell them that they are beautifully crafted and created by a God who has good plans for them and loves them beyond measure. And just, I feel so strongly about this, that our children need to know how loved they are just because they were created by God.
Well, and I didn't even realize this till this past week. You've written a children's book.
Oh.
What is that, and what's your message?
Sure. So it really is being a mom with a totally new sort of disorienting.
Because I don't know when you had time to write a book, but
it was over many, many years, and they were just the collections of thoughts. But yeah, it was really becoming a mom. We had two boys in short order. I had never even babysat. I didn't really, I didn't really want kids. My family, my background had been really, really messy and not healthy, and so having a family was really sort of terrifying because I wanted it to look so much different than my own family had. And so I was totally unprepared. I'd also been working full time and then stepped way back. And so that was a big transition as well. But the Lord really used that time period to show me through my children what my relationship with him could look like. Like if you think about your kids, they find joy in the littlest things. I remember one time we had a mole trapper because our yard had lots of those little moles. And she and wouldn't just take. I would be happy to take her word that she caught a mole, but instead she left it at the front door. So the kids were like, "There's another mole," and anyway, just this delight in the crazy, gross things of life, and how they trust their parents for anything. One time, I think I was about 3 at the time, but my oldest son, he went to bed pretty early, and I think we'd been out on a campaign trip, and so we were coming in late. And he looked up and saw the moon and was just amazed, said, "Mom, get that for me." And like totally thought I could.
Aww.
And so there's just this precious innocence and trust and faith we see in our kiddos that really helped me understand more of God the Father and what he looks like as a parent to me. So it's definitely not a how-to book, just more of what I learned through my kids.
Oh, well, as we get ready to close, in your job in an ADF, every day there's a new battle. It is, I'm sure that gets tiring at some days, and some days you might feel defeated, and then some days you'll have a win and a victory. But every day, y'all are getting more and more cases that you are representing. How does God continue to give you the strength and hope to go to battle every day for these cases?
I think a lot of it just has to do with our team. We've got a wonderful team. We've got an organization where we pray for our cases, where we pray for our clients, and just the ability to recognize that God's in control. And I think the ability to leave the results to Him as well is super helpful, because you don't always win the cases, and sometimes they go the wrong way, and it hurts many people in really real ways. So I think recognizing that God has put us in this battle. He expects us to do our best, but also that He's sovereign, and that He can work all things for good, even if we don't see it. I think is a great help to me personally.
Well, Erin, thank you. I know you're very busy, and for you to take the time to join us on Fearless. And I want to encourage those who are listening to go to Alliance Defending Freedom's website. They have an incredible website that talks about each of these cases. They do it in terms that we can understand how this impacts and how you can get involved. Very rarely here on Fearless do I talk about other organizations and promote them so much. I believe in Alliance Defending Freedom. As I said earlier in this podcast, they fight to keep those doors open for the gospel. And I pray that at Samaritan's Purse and the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, we are always faithful to go through those doors. Thank you for joining Erin and I on today's episode of Fearless. If you're listening right now, you can't see, but I'm sitting here in my office, as I often do, with my copy of Decision magazine. For years, I've used Decision to help me stay informed with key cultural and biblical issues. I even use it to help me prepare for this podcast sometimes. If you aren't yet receiving a copy of Decision magazine, I would love to invite you to subscribe today. I know it will be a help to you to help stay informed on the important topics of our time. You can go to decisionmagazine.com to subscribe today.